A look at the past is really 100%. I suppose I had to suspect suspicions when my wife returned home from work in the art gallery for the first time, rejoicing in the new patron. But when you completely trust someone, and she has never caused you the slightest concern in 17 years that you are together, your original desire is to give her a little relax. My initial intention was wrong, completely incorrect. I am Bobby Scragg. My wife is Tracy. We met at the small university of the Midwest 18 years ago, began to meet 17 years ago, and got married 16 years ago. 14 years ago, we had a daughter, and 12 years ago, we had a son. I work as a programmer in a state institution. I earn good, but not a lot of money. I succeeded so much that Tracy was able to be a housewife mother while the children were small. But 2 years ago, she decided that the children were already adults enough so that she could spread her wings and got a job for a 30-hour work a week in a prestigious art gallery in the city. In college, she studied art, so intellectually, for Trace, this was by no means a problem. She could speak and walk. The gallery primarily served customers who have a slightly better financial situation than ours. We live in a large city in the Middle West, and there were many people with such a financial level that the gallery could conduct a good business. And as a bonus from his work, Tracy managed to talk with these people and for a short while, plunging into their world before returning home to his one-day life. From time to time, both of us had to enter their world, since sometimes Tracy arranged a large exhibition in the gallery, and I could accompany it as a plus one. I must admit, it was exciting to spend several hours with some influential people. Computer fans like me often have to communicate with companies, politicians, lawyers, and presidents of banks. Therefore, from time to time, Tracy came home excited after meeting with some celebrity or someone influential. The children and I admired how she just sailed around the house for some time, and then we left her road when reality came, and we understood what place in life she fits into the picture. Gloom was not one of the best qualities of Tracy. Children usually scattered in their rooms, very often leaving me until the end of the evening to take on the main blow of her stinging comments about our life. Most of the time, I just took it calmly. When it came to me, I tinned with my car in the garage. So, the last few weeks, Tracy was chatting about some brilliant real estate genius, which recently became a regular visitor to the gallery. Jackson Aloysius Fairchild, a 28-year-old millionaire, recently moved to an expensive new house and wanted his walls to be decorated with works of art, reflecting his position in his life, said Trace. In general, she apparently was impressed with him, although she expressed the idea that he too seemed to be somewhat occupied with himself. In various conversations, she mentioned that he was beautiful and well complex, and often talked about various physical exertion, such as cycling and climbing. Tracy, brag about the new patron was not something unusual, so I did not really think about it and allowed her to chat for the next 2 weeks. Then it subsided, as I expected, and I did not hear a word about Jackson Aloysius Fairchild until I was introduced to him at the Christmas gala concert in the gallery just a few weeks before the holiday. I must admit that he was an impressive physical example, about 6'2", 190, and in his road suit from Armani he looked solid. He was also a blonde, blue-eyed, and extremely beautiful, even in my exhausted opinion. I did not quite expect this. I talked with him for about 30 seconds while Tracy was representing us, and in just this short period of time I noticed that he examines my wife from head to toe, like a tie. Yes, this evening she was magnificent in a blue skirt and jacket, with a small hint in the neckline, visible from under the white blouse, but his gaze was rather grinning than admiring. Tracy seemed to be too busy with everything that was happening to pay attention, but I paid attention to it. Tracy went to chat, and I went to the bar. I made a portion of Jack Daniels with ice and found Kenny Taylor, the husband of one of my wife's colleagues whom I met before and with whom I got along very well. We talked a lot about sports and cars. I talked with Kenny for a while, and then he talked a little. After about an hour, I noticed Tracy, talking in a small group of people, and Jackson Aloysius Fairchild, wrapping it around. I went to the bar, took her beloved drink, rising, and went to the group. I introduced myself and handed the Tracy a glass of wine. Then I quietly reached for the right thigh of Tracy and removed Jackson's hand, which lay there behind her. He did not say a word. He simply grinned to me, returning his hand to his body. I talked with the group for several minutes. Then Tracy went a little more to talk, and I went in a different direction, after making sure that Jackson did not pursue her. I expected to see how Tracy is going through his business while I communicate with some of her colleagues, but after about an hour, I did not see my wife anywhere. Looking around the second time, I also did not see Jackson. My spider feelings were not just tingling, so I made every effort to find Tracy. I did not find her in the gallery, so I went through the front door and began to circle along the gallery. In the parking lot, there were small groups of people in a coat, which it seemed were about to leave, but Tracy was still not there. And then I noticed a pair, quite comfortably sitting in the black Jaguar XJ. The car worked. The couple sat tightly in the back seat. I did not bother to check if it was Trace and Jackson. I suggested that yes. I went to the car and opened the door next to the woman. Passengers jumped up to this so that everything that I could install was that if they did not kiss, they were approaching this. It's time to go, dear. Now, I said in my most polite but in a firm tone. We, we, we were simple, Trady muttered, stuttering when Jackson grinned to me. I don't care. The time has come to leave, I said in a voice just above the whisper. True, Bobby. You have to come and listen to this sound system, Jackson. This is absolutely crystal. The stereo system was included and played some kind of concert music, but I do not think that one of them listened to music. Another time, Jackson. It's really time for us to go, I said in my most evasive voice. I took my wife out of the car, and we went to where my Ford F-150 was parked. Wait, I can't leave yet. The party has 2 more hours. It is expected that I will stay here for all this time and will be one of the mistress, said Tracy, with perseverance in her voice. If your boss has problems with this, he can call me directly, I said. And what the hell do you think you did? We really listened to the audio system of his car. This is amazing, she said with a note of trepidation in her voice. Yeah, I answered without a note of reverence in my voice. Tracy continued to pretend to be innocent, but the next couple of weeks between us was cool. But in the end, I felt better. And everything returned to our usual existence. So a few months later, I was completely surprised when Tracy told me that I had accepted the invitation to Jackson's cottage by the lake for the weekend on July 4th. It was to be we, Boss Tracy, his wife, and 2 more couples who were Jackson's friends. We went on Friday in the afternoon and stayed until noon of Sunday, and Jackson cooked both days, with a full bar, swimming, boat riding, and everything else that was available. I began to protest, but Tracy simply said that we were doing this, turned around, and left me. In fact, the weekend began perfectly. We spent several hours on the lake on Jackson's rather large sailboat. All women looked great in their bikini, and the guys, at least, looked not so bad in their baggy costumes. In truth, Jackson probably had the best body among the 5 guys, although fortunately, it did not seem to hang better than the rest of us. And Trace, despite the fact that she was the second to age from 5 women, were probably best built from the spinning ground. I thought that her black bikini showed her 36C and a round ass without leaving too much skin. In the backyard of his cottage, Jackson had a damn equipped grill, and there was even a completely clogged refrigerator with beer, wine, and ice for cocktails. He brought pickled steaks and began to fry them on the grill, while everyone was sitting on chairs next to the grill area with a drink of his choice. Jackson was a kind master and still cared for Tracy, who seemed to hold on to him a little further than for Christmas. The night passed perfectly, and around midnight, we all diverged in our bedrooms, and Jackson, like a lonely man, went to the main bedroom. Saturday began with a visit to a small town adjacent to the lake. It was a small tourist trap with all kinds of cute shops, and most women returned home with several things. Then, we ate a luxurious lunch from the heroic sandwiches before a volleyball game began. The libations began after we finished the lesson, and in the evening, the grill prepared sausage and grated pork. We enjoyed another magnificent dinner, and having seated a couple of hours, enjoying the breeze, Boss Tracy Lou invited him and me to walk around the lake. Given everything that we all ate and drank, I thought it was a great idea to prepare for the second round. It took us about 30 minutes to get around the lake, and when we returned, the group passed from the table to the chairs and chaiselons. I was not truly happy when I saw Tracy, sitting in a deck chair, leaning my back against Jackson and clasping his hands on his waist. When we came up, Tracy smiled and got up with Jackson, but it seemed that she was not in a hurry, although she knew that it would not be too pleasant for me. She never particularly looked into my eyes, but came up and sat in a chair next to me for most of the night. I noticed how she and Jackson exchanged glances several times in the evening when they thought that I did not look. As the night before, around midnight, the party began to diverge, but while the other 3 pairs went to their bedrooms, Tracy quietly asked me to join her in the kitchen. When we arrived, for the first time in the evening, she looked directly into my eyes and announced, Jackson asked me to spend the night in his bed tonight. I accepted his proposal. I must have lost consciousness or something like that and hit my head, because I thought that Tracy just told me that he was going to sleep with Jackson in his bed. I looked at her as if she had 3 eyes, and she realized that I was not entirely sure that she had heard her correctly. It has nothing to do with love. It is exclusively about sex, Bobby, she began. I have been completely faithful to you for 17 years. You are the only man I love. But I want to have sex with Jackson. He excites me, and I want to see how another man feels. After tonight, I will again become your absolutely faithful wife for the rest of my life. But I think that one night, you owe me. I don't know how long I stood with my mouth open. My wife just told me that she was going to sleep with another man because she wants it, and I owe her for that. You will sleep with him over my corpse, I finally blurted out. These are not negotiations, Bobby. Accept it as it is. I have him tonight. Tomorrow, and until the end of my life, I will be yours. Don't be too sure of that, babe. Remember, every action has consequences. Damn it, Bobby, she told me in half a whisper. Do you really have to see everything so black and white? For God's sake, this is one night. One night and all. And you are going to ruin everything. One night. We never thought that you would be so intractable. Probably I should just keep silent and act behind your back, but I was afraid that if you learn about it, we were definitely the end. Therefore, I thought that if you know and let me go, it will not be treason. She turned in heels and left. When I left the kitchen and headed for the living room, I saw Tracy took Jackson's hand and went to the main bedroom. I think that the clouding of my vision occurred due to tears that dripped from my eyes. I went to the inner bar and poured myself a portion of Jack. It took me about 5 minutes to finish it, and when I did it, I went to the main bedroom and very quietly stood behind the door. I heard the sounds of two people who have sex. My life, how I knew her, ended. I drank several portions of Jack, trying to understand what to do next. My first instinct was to leave and get a divorce as soon as possible. But the idea that I will have to abandon my children did not suit me most of the time. I have not seen anything good in this decision either for myself or for them. On the other hand, my wife at that very moment was in the bed of another man, so I knew that I simply could not bear it. For a moment I thought about burning the house and killing all of us, but sanity prevailed over me. Then it seems I turned off for a while, because when I looked at my watch, it was 3 in the morning and everything was quiet in the house. Stagging, I got to the bedroom, which was taken from Tracy. The bed was still seasoned because it was empty, as I knew. I lay right on the bedspread and slept uneasily for the next few hours, waking up at 7:30. I went to the next bathroom, quickly took a shower and brushed my teeth before going to the kitchen. The remaining 3 pairs have already stood up and had breakfast from bacon and eggs. Marna, the wife of Lou, Boss Trey apparently, was the main cook, and she offered me a plate, while the rest muttered, wanting a good morning. By the way, everyone looked at me out of the corner of their eyes. It was obvious that they were well aware of what happened. I know that my face blushed and flared up, because the level of humiliation went off scale. It's all right, Bobby. We have already seen this, Marna said sympathetically, while the rest were nodded their heads. Jackson did it 3 or 4 times. He is an alpha male, and when he sees something he wants, he is following it. He's just so programmed. I am also inclined to think that he is very well versed in the aspect of humiliation, and I think that women also understand this, Lou added. But I don't think this is something personal. He is what it is. So what happened to those pairs with whom he did this? I asked. Well, as far as I know, they are still married. It seems stupid to breaking a long-standing marriage due to one night or so, for that matter, said Marna. Especially when children and all that are involved in business, added Joan, one of the wives. You mean that he is a troll of married women with children so that wives can use children as a lever for a novel? I asked incredulously. It looks like him, Ralph intervened, Joan's husband. But he is a really good guy, except for one little oddity. I know him from the college, and if you are his friend, then you have a friend for life. So I can forgive him for one oddity. All the more so since this seems to not hurt couples in the long run. In fact, I know that Jackson received her last love hobby, and her husband is a profitable deal for an apartment in North Carolina last year, and Jackson will stay with them when he is in the area. At that moment, we began to hear some moans coming from the main bedroom. It was Tracy, and I found out by sounds that apparently accompanied the dream with Jackson last night and this morning. Everyone at the table blushed with embarrassment, and I turned white with rage. Why don't we finish breakfast on the deck? Suggested Marna. After about 30 minutes, Tracy and Jackson joined us on the deck, taking a shower and looking very pleased with themselves. I must admit that Tracy shone with a positive and, it seemed, did not hide too much that everyone knew what she had just done. She held a plate with breakfast in her hands, immediately went to the sun lounger, on which I sat on the edge, and I moved my legs to her. At that moment, she stood with her back, but I could see how pink her back was on top of her t-shirt. I could also distinguish between the trace of the bite on her right shoulder, right under the strap of Mikey and a bra. She did not say hello to me except for a nod when she sat down, and I did not see the reason to break the silence. So, what are all plans for today? Said Jackson with a cheerful voice of the owner. I think we need to return and give the children a little of ourselves this afternoon, isn't it sweet? I said in the back of Tracy. She hesitated for a second, and by the way her hair and head moved, I could see that she rolls her eyes to me. This is just one of those things that you know when you are together as long as we are. Since she was sitting facing everyone else, everyone could see how she rolled her eyes, and I needed everything in my power so as not to extend her hand and not to hit her on the back of the head. I was hoping that we could linger a little and perhaps go on swimming again, dear, she said categorically. No, we must return. You are finishing breakfast. I will load the car. The wheels will go after 10, I said, heading back inside. I loaded the car in record time. Tracy just finished breakfast when I returned to the deck. I grabbed her by the wrist, waved her hand, hastily said goodbye to the whole group, and practically dragged Tracy to the car. I did not need to look in the eye to see what they were thinking about. I knew, because I already thought about it. With the exception of the radio on, the first 45 minutes we rode silently, and Tracy mostly looked at the passenger. I think she was afraid that if she looked right in front of her and I would see her face, the explosion would begin. So she simply continued to look away from me. Finally, I could no longer endure it. Was it worth it? I was inhabited, he said to her. She did not move a couple of seconds. Then I saw her deeply sighed. She turned to me. Yes, it was. Wonderful. She cooled with an absent look in her eyes. Not quite the answer I expected. I did not quite understand what to expect, but I did not assume that she would tell me the terrible truth. Perhaps I expected some stuttering, a little truth, a lot of retreats, maybe apologies, but not of the whole truth. And in the words of her face, I could say that it really was true. 17 years old, 2 children, all that we built together, did in one night? I asked. She turned a little to me in her place and looked at me with a sad, almost humbled look. It depends on you, Bobby, she said. As I promised you, it was only once, and now I will be yours as devotedly as before last night. It was an amazing night, and now it ended. But if you can lose your love me so quickly and destroy our family, then do what you should. But believe me, I will take the children and make sure that they know that you have destroyed our family. I was stunned and silent. Not even an apology. And she will blame me for the collapse of our family. He and Jackson probably planned everything well. I have never seen Tracy from this side before, and I definitely did not like it. So, I can assume that today's morning actions with Jackson were a designed action made for the sake of humiliation? I asked. Not really. He wanted to invite me again before I become my husband's faithful wife. He is ready to live according to my rules. We stopped with my husband's relatives to take the children. When we arrived there, nothing had changed for Tracy. Despite the fact that I got along with the parents of Tracy, Ron and Judy, I could barely look into their eyes. It seemed to me that they somehow found out that Tracy had instructed me of horns, and I felt ashamed and humiliated. I wanted to shout the truth about their daughter, but I knew that now was not the time or place. All the time, while we were there was a puzzled expression on the face of Tracy. She definitely liked my discomfort, and she prevailed. This is definitely the wrong way to make amends, I thought to myself. Tracy went to bed later at the end of the night. I turned away from her, and she climbed inside and lay on me from behind. Then I felt her hand stretched out and grabbed my stick. After she spent me twice up and down, I turned to face her and slowly shook my head. No, this will not happen tonight, I said. You can't do a damn thing to make me stand up for you. You just have to be content with the fact that this asshole gave you last night and this morning. For the first time since Saturday evening, Trace showed weakness. She looked offended and shocked by my refusal of her courtship in one of the very few times in our life together. But don't you want to return my kitten to yourself? Jackson says this is an almost automatic reaction of a man in such situations. Oh, he did it now. So, he is not only a genius in the field of real estate, but also a sexopathologist. Well, then he should warn you that some men do not perceive what you did as a sexual challenge. Some of us perceive this as a complete betrayal, and vomiting can do more. Tracy's eyes opened wider than before. Never for our 17 years of marriage, I have never talked with her in this way, and never cursed at her before. She removed her hand from my penis, so I rolled over to the other side and pretended to fall asleep. I heard her crying quietly. I did not care. Next week, I signed up for an appointment with a respected divorce lawyer. The meeting was, to put it mildly, not very. Marcus Rothstein had to explain to me twice that my options were actually limited. Either refuse half of his shit and my children, or wait for it for the sake of children, and then refuse half of my shit if we divorce as soon as they are born. Age. We all know the parents who live their lives through their children. And then, when the children leave home, parents really have nothing in common, and they are divorced. In fact, it was a script that my lawyer outlined me. To be a superpower for the next 6 years, and then divorce Tracy as soon as the children ceased to be a problem. At least in my case, I did not have to worry about the running of Tracy if she told me the truth about how to keep her promise. That's what I did. If my children were involved in any event, I was usually a responsible parent and made sure that Tracy also participated. Why should I be the only one who will have to participate in the collection of funds in a philatelic club or work on a 4-hour woodworking project? We were parents on whom everyone is equal and shake their heads. As for the physical side, I did not touch Tracy sexually for 6 months until she told me that she would have to leave if I did not want to fulfill her male duties. Since I was ready to put a nut myself, literally, I was able to convince myself that I could have sex with Tracy just as she did with Jackson. Only sex, and nothing more. In the end, she was still a beautiful woman. I was not forced to have sex with the troll. It was not very pleasant, but our first night in the saddle set a tone for what was supposed to happen in the next few years. We had a date in one of our favorite Italian places, and I treated Tracy with 2 more glasses of wine than usual. "Where did the hell come from?" she whispered to me. "Damn it, Bobby. I will have to wait another 6 months to repeat the performance?" I could not answer this question, so he said nothing and pressed against her back. I admit, every time I thought about Tracy with Jackson, I became furious. And in our classes, there was nothing gentle then. Damn, then it was not even love. It was pure sex. However, she seemed to have fun and never complained, although after that, we rarely hugged and spoke gently, as we had before the incident. It seemed that everything returned to the fact that I believed would become a new norm for us. But within 1 week of each month, I asked a private detective to follow her, just to check if she holds her word, and was not to meet with Jackson or someone else, even in this regard. I spent a lot of money to gain a little peace of mind. 6 years later, our youngest child Terry went to study at the College of Michigan. Melissa studied in Michigan, therefore. When Terry made a decision, we waged a small war between the children all summer before they both parted into their schools. Since Terry was only a freshman, he lived in the hostel of the campus, and Tracy and I helped him move a week before classes. Neither Tracy nor I remembered that they took half of what Terry took. "You kept your promise. But 16 years before that, you made me a vow that you just threw in the trash that night. I told you not to do it then, but you were going to do it anyway and threatened me with the fact that they took my children. I couldn't let you do that. And you ordered me to be served in the gallery in front of Lou and all my colleagues? Could you be any more cruel?" She croaked. "I felt like Lou had just completed the circle you started at the lake house 6 years ago. And as far as cruelty goes, your Sunday morning sex with all of us in the house was the most humiliating moment of my life. I bet I got my revenge." Tracy continued to sob, but I saw a grain of recognition on her face. "6 years ago, you told me you thought sex was worth it, Jackson Aloysius Fairchild. It was wonderful. Do you still feel the same? But I kept my promise to you. From then on, for 6 years, I was completely faithful," she whined. "So in what way did you exaggerate your promise?" I answered quickly. "If your vow was only valid for 16 years, would your promise be valid for half that period? Say 8 years? Bobby, I'm truly sorry if this incident leads to us getting divorced, but I told you so. I didn't cheat." "Yes, you did," I insisted. "Just because you told me this in advance instead of sneaking around behind my back doesn't make it right. We didn't discuss it. You and he did. We didn't agree to this. You and he did. And then you broke your vow to me. You regret the divorce it caused, but you don't regret the action. You never regretted your action. I didn't give you a hall pass. We haven't come to any agreement that you can get a hall pass. You just gave it to yourself and decided that I would accept your stupid decision. You ripped my heart out that weekend, Tracy. And on the way home, you told me it was my problem, and I needed to deal with it, or you would take my kids. It looks like love to you, because it certainly doesn't to me." She just looked at me dumbfounded. Tracy got herself a good lawyer, and he convinced the judge that we needed couples counseling. At the first session, the consultant, a pretty young woman of about 30, asked me why I thought I couldn't get over Tracy cheating on me just once, especially since she didn't go behind my back or sleep. With Jackson, I looked at her as if she had 2 heads, then asked if she had ever been married, not seeing rings on her left hand. "My marital status has nothing to do with your answer, Mr. Sprague," she said more than defensively. "Definitely the wrong answer," I said, getting ready to leave. While I was leaving, both women sat motionless. That evening, I received a call from Ron and Judy, Tracy's parents. I loved Tracy's parents very much. Both my parents died several years ago, and after their deaths, I became even closer to Ron and Judy. They responded to my love cordially, but I knew that in this matter, they would have to side with their daughter. It's just what a parent does. I haven't spoken to them since Tracy was discharged a few weeks ago. They were both on the line, on speakerphone. Judy started the conversation after the pleasantry. Bobby, why do you have to be so tough about this? She said. You know Tracy loves you with all her heart. You know she kept her promise to you to never have sex with anyone else again. Why do you have to be so intractable? What exactly did she tell you guys about that weekend? I asked. Well, honey, she told us that you two talked about how she had sex with some guy one night, and then she promised that she would be faithful to you forever. She told us what she told you instead of sneaking around behind your back. Like she could because she really loves you and doesn't want to lose you. That's about half the story, Mom. Are you two sitting? Say what you want to say, Bobby. We are sitting, her father answered briefly. We didn't talk about her having sex with Jackson Aloysius Fairchild. She and Jackson talked. She will grab the children and turn them against me. I warned her not to do this, but it didn't make the slightest difference. So they had fun that night, and just to be safe, they had a little extra fun time that morning, and the rest of us sat in the living room to get started before your daughter got too loud, so we moved to the backyard. I had never been so humiliated in my life until I went home, and Tracy told me how wonderful the sex was. Does this look like a loving wife? Does this sound like someone who really doesn't care about her husband? This is not true for me. But you lived with her for another 6 years? Asked her father. No, I lived with the children for another 6 years, and after a while I even returned to your daughter. But love began to die that night, and continues to die a little every day. I will never love her as much as I once did. I heard Judy crying. Sorry, son. We didn't know the whole story, Ron said. We should have realized that it would have been worse for you to just leave. Thank you for staying all these years for the children, because Tracy and her lawyer tried everything they could to drag out the case. The divorce took about a year. I don't know. Maybe Tracy decided that I would lose the desire to fight and stay married. She should have known this wouldn't happen. Although I didn't realize it at the time, being an involved parent while my children were growing up really supported my standing in social circles and also gave me a glimpse into the personal lives of some other parents. I got to know many more divorcees in my age group than usual, and used that knowledge to my advantage when my divorce finally became official. I went on day trips or went to restaurants and dance clubs on the weekends, and almost always had an interesting conversation partner. Many of them were divorced mothers of friends of my children, and others were friends of friends. I think the old saying that if someone is willing to look, everything will be found is true. In fact, I had more sex and with more partners than before I got married. Life wouldn't be so bad if I ignored the hole in my heart that Tracy made. After my divorce, I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment because I wanted my kids to have a place to stay with me if and when they wanted. I know they were angry at Tracy at first after the divorce, but I figured they'd get over it eventually and maybe split time between the two of us until they left for good. For their sake, I hoped that he and Tracy would come to some kind of agreement, but I had no intention of brokering that deal. Tracy had done wrong to all 3 of us, and I wasn't going to make it any easier for her to get back into the kids' lives. While I wasn't surprised that both kids chose to live with me during college breaks, I was surprised by how quickly Tracy's parents got back into the fold. I didn't hear much from them during the proceedings, which I fully understood. But about 2 months after the divorce became official, Judy called me and asked if I could meet her and Ron for dinner at Maggiano's, Italian restaurant in our city. Considering how well we got along before the divorce, I saw no reason not to go, and the 3 of us had a great evening. The evening got off to a rocky start as both Ron and Judy apologized for both Tracy's behavior and any animosity that may have arisen from them supporting her. At least until they learned the rest of the story, so to speak. I told them the apology was accepted, and I understood that they were supporting their daughter. I then asked them if we could change the subject, and the evening got better from there, despite the occasional comments and tears about what could have been. Having Ron and Judy back in my life gave me a better sense of normalcy, and I think they enjoyed my company as much as I appreciated theirs. We rarely talked about Tracy, except when we were remembering some event from the past. We got together probably a couple times a month while the kids were at school, and when they came home, we were together even more. Then it was only a matter of time before I introduced a 6th person into our little get-togethers. Amy and I started dating about 18 months after our divorce. I was dating at the time, not really looking for Miss Right, when Amy and some friends walked into the restaurant where the kids and I were having dinner on Saturday night. She and 3 of her friends were sitting just a table away from me, and although I didn't pay much attention to them, my kids were the best for me. Hey Dad, do you see those women who just sat down? Melissa asked to herself. They all look good, and 3 of them aren't wearing wedding rings. Jesus, Melissa, I don't need you to be my assistant, I replied. She's right, Dad. There's some power on the table, Terry added. So I looked around. The children were right. Shit. Maybe I really need you as my assistant, I told Melissa. We finished dinner. I drove, so I gave the car keys to Melissa and told the kids that I would find a house in Uber. I then walked over and introduced myself to a table of lovely ladies who quickly invited me to join them. While they ate, I sipped Eagle Rare bourbon. You just abandoned your kids to flirt with us? What kind of father are you? Asked the long-haired blonde Jennifer, who was sitting at my round table at 10 o'clock. I'm a father who knows his kids have good taste, so when they noticed 3 of you weren't wearing wedding rings, I had 2 options. Go home and watch a baseball game and beat the crap out of me. From the same kids, or come here, maybe make a complete ass of yourself, but at least get more respect from the kids. And they always told me that it was just as easy to love a beautiful stepmother as it was to love an ugly one. Wow, what a thing you have going on, big guy, said the married brunette at my place at 2 o'clock. Not a jerk, just a confident guy with 2 smart, chatty kids. And good taste, I might add. So are you the teacher here? They all giggled, even Rose, who I was picking on. So, big guy, you tell your story to the class first, she replied with a smile. So I told 4 near strangers the Reader's Digest version of my life, quickly recounting my former 17-year marriage and subsequent divorce. Not good enough, Romeo. If you are such a wonderful guy, how did your wife run away? Asked Angelica, the black-haired goddess at my 8 o'clock. There are 3 of us here who have gone through the divorce process, so we want to know in advance whether we should even waste time talking to you. Straight. I like it, I replied. For the first time since I got divorced 2 years ago, I laid out my entire story, even the most painful parts. Up to this point, the only people who knew the whole story were Tracy's parents and my divorce lawyer. It was uncomfortably quiet when I finished my story. I saw tears in everyone's eyes. Damn, I was in tears myself. Well, that's one way to destroy a room, Carol said, touching my right arm. I'm so sorry. I try not to dwell on the past. Look on the bright side. I got 2 wonderful kids out of the deal, and my in-laws aren't too bad either. Your relatives? You've got to be kidding me, Angelique gasped. Now you are expanding the boundaries of my beliefs. No one loves their in-laws that much, especially after a divorce. What can I say? I'm special. If you guys are done eating, here's a drink for me. It's my turn to listen to your stories, I said. We sat like that for 3 more rounds until I had heard everyone's story. Jennifer got divorced because her husband was a serial cheater. Angelique and Carol's marriage ended due to irreconcilable differences, and Rose has been married to the best husband in the world for 26 years. She called him the best husband in the world several times, and each time the other 3 nodded their heads in agreement. This is the person I need to meet. The women told me that they were going to a bachelorette party once a month, so my being there was something of a violation of the rules for Rose. But Rose suggested that if she could bring her husband to the next walk, then I could come too if I wanted. The other 3 quickly agreed. Can I bring a date? I asked boldly. A month later, the 6 of us gathered at the same restaurant. I was able to meet Sean, Rose's husband, and I came away from that meeting thinking that he really could be the best husband in the world. We immediately found a common language. The 6 of us continued to go out to eat every month, and I began to see the 3 single women as good friends. Sometimes the 4 of us would do things. Sometimes me and one of the women would actually go on a date. Some of the dates ended with us having sex, sometimes making love. They were all great in the sack no matter which way we did it. And I made sure that every one of them got the best possible effort, including making sure I was always hitting the woman. I enjoy it tremendously, and I think I'm pretty good at it. And judging by the screaming orgasms I got from all 3 of them, I think the women really enjoyed it. After about a year, Angelica and I became exclusive. I was still good friends with Jennifer and Carol, but all concerned understood that this was what exclusivity meant. Although when the girls got together, sometimes the banter could get a little rough, even for me. My children got used to Angelica pretty quickly. It took her in-laws a little longer to warm to her. I understood this and was in no hurry. Having a permanent girlfriend meant to me that their faint hopes that Tracy and I would make up were quickly extinguished. But I think they saw the same thing that I saw in Angelique, and since we had such a strong connection, I think it was only a matter of time before they felt natural with her and started showing her, why do I think so highly of them? After Angelica had talked to the in-laws about a half-dozen times, Judy pulled me aside from the others and told me we needed to talk. She looked as serious as a heart attack, so I was a little worried that my marital happiness was about to explode. Bobby, I may not have the right to say this, but it's too bad I'm saying it anyway, she began. How long have you been dating this woman? Don't you think it's time to put a ring on her finger before anyone else gets such a brilliant idea? I tried my best to match the serious expression on her face, but inside, I was smiling from ear to ear. When your ex-mother-in-law sees this, well, I guess she was right. You're right, Mom. I need to lock this girl up. I guess I was a little scared, I said. Do it quickly, you big fool. she replied. About 6 weeks later, I took Angelica back to Maggiano for her 47th birthday. I encouraged her to dress for the event and saw her version of a little black dress. Since Angelica couldn't get pregnant, she had no pregnancies, and her body looked like a 35-year-old girl. Her breasts weren't sagging, and her stomach was still toned. I know she also spent a lot of time at the gym, so it wasn't just that she didn't have kids. The dress fell about 5 inches above her knees and was cut out at the front to show off some of her lovely 36C measurements. My head was spinning all night, and I barely managed to stop myself from drooling during dinner. We both ordered cheesecake for dessert, and our waiter returned with a tray with 2 slices and a bottle of champagne. "We didn't order champagne," Angelique whispered to me. "We didn't do that." "I did," I whispered back. "This is for drinking right after I put this ring on your finger." I went to my favorite jeweler after Judy spoke to me and asked him to make me a custom diamond engagement ring. I thought he did a great job. Apparently, so did Angelique, who started crying as soon as she saw it. I'm pretty sure there was a yes somewhere in the middle of all the sobbing. We had a simple spring wedding. Terry was my best man. Rose was Angelique's matron of honor. No, I didn't invite Tracy. Although I know it hurt Ron and Judy, I didn't consider my ex-wife a friend. The only time we were together was when there was something to do with children. We were cordial when we were together. But unlike some people who can go through a divorce and become friends, that won't happen with me. I couldn't forget the disrespect. And if you don't, I don't think you're truly forgiving. My kids eventually forgave Tracy, and I'm okay with that. She's their mother. But I don't ask about her, and my kids don't volunteer information about her. Same with Ron and Judy. Angelica seemed to get along well with Tracy when we were all together. This is fine with me because Angelique is her own person and can choose who she wants to be friends with. Again, we don't really talk about it. We got together twice after the wedding at Melissa's wedding and then at Terry's wedding. In both cases, I was a very proud father and was not going to let anything detract from my children's important days. Grandchildren began to appear a couple of years after they both got married. And then I saw a side of Angelique that I never expected. While Tracy and I were overjoyed to become grandparents, Granny Angel was overjoyed. Apparently, she had a bad mother itch that needed to be scratched, so to speak, and her grandchildren helped make up the bill. She was completely ridiculous. Tracy eventually remarried, and then they got divorced again. And then he married for the 3rd time, and they got divorced for the 3rd time. Angelica told me that she thought Tracy was looking for another version of me, but couldn't find her. She wanted me to promise her that I would never leave her. "I don't have to promise you that," I replied.